Like him, hate him, or be non-committal about him, one thing you probably can't do is ignore the former Nigerian president Olusegun Obasanjo, a man who ruled Nigeria twice, in the 1970s as a military head of state and from 1999 to 2007 as an elected civilian president, while serving a prison term in between. A man who to this day continues to influence the world. Throughout that illustrious and sometimes turbulent career, President Obasanjo wrote many letters that not only chart the history of this country and continent in a deeply personal way, but reveal a new side of his life, his meticulous attention to detail and his prodigious intellect. True to type, Chief Obasanjo wrote many withering letters, some of them to serving heads of state, including Nigerian leaders, as he unapologetically spoke truth to power, capturing the pain and the anger of the dispossessed through the courage of his convictions. And now a new book containing treasured extracts of some of those letters has just been launched in Abuja. It's called The Letterman, inside the secret letters of former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo. So as we head towards a fresh election and hopes of a new dawn in 2023, what might aspirational leaders learn from this book? I'll be joined in the studio by the author of The Letterman, Musikilu Mojeed, who is also the editor-in-chief of the Premium Times newspaper. Plus, we have our analysts who will give us their perspectives on the key stories of the moment and the day. I'm Charles Anyegolu, and this is Arise Prime Time. So what you might ask is the role of letter writing in governance, leadership and politics. Well, to answer that question, take a look inside the pages of a new book written by the editor-in-chief of the Premium Times newspaper, Musikilu Mojeed. It's called The Letterman, inside the secret letters of former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and it's been described as quite a read. Letters written over a period of 60 years by President Obasanjo, that vividly and incisively sweeping period through Nigerian and African history, everything from the unrelentingly depressing requiem of the Nigerian Civil War, the brutality and coerciveness of apartheid and attempts to rid the continent of its scourge, to the fear and loneliness of a Nigerian jail. Letters that are infused with an understanding of global issues and the experience of dealing with them on a national and international level. And today, as Nigeria heads towards a political future that seems tenuous, reviewers say President Obasanjo's letters, as contained in Mr. Mojeed's surprisingly personal book, show that beyond the disillusionment, a development path to success is possible, and that this country and its leadership can be reshaped for the better. Tunji Olanipekun was at the book launch for Arise News.
Letterman is a book by one of Nigeria's foremost journalists, Musikilu Mojeed. It tells what he says are the secrets of the many letters written by Olusegun Obasanjo to different people in and outside Nigeria. The author says former President Obasanjo is one of the unsung heroes of Nigeria and Africa because of his investment in peace on the continent. He says the various letters are expressions of pure patriotism and loyalty to the Nigerian state.
Once, Obasanjo had a meeting with Alabi Sama and other officers during the war. And as Alabi Sama was returning to his post, Obasanjo was writing to him about the meeting they already had, documenting what they discussed at the meeting, and telling Alabi Sama how he felt about it. One thing that I noticed, maybe I'm right or wrong, is that Obasanjo appeared, I think Bishop Kuka hinted at that, Obasanjo appeared to have some kind of moral superiority over his superiors and subordinates, which is why the way he speaks to people and nobody is able to do anything about it.
Halfway into the program, the Letterman walked in. He jokingly said, though the author didn't get his permission to write the book, he did a good job.
I read the book. I was completely flabbergasted by the amount of work that he has done in writing the book. So I was torn between what should I do or what should I not do. One, he didn't tell me before he wrote the book, but he has done an excellent job.
To put the matter to rest, Obasanjo explains why he wrote, writes, and will still write letters.
I believe very much in letter writing. Very much so. And I don't believe that letter writing is out of date. Because you have to communicate. Your letter must be such that is relevant, is realistic, and it is purposeful and goes to the point to address the issue you want to address.
The book reviewer, the Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, Matthew Hassan Kuka, describes Obasanjo as a thoroughbred nation builder and a leader with foresight. He says Nigerian leaders must be lettered and vast in record keeping to enrich national discourse and institutional growth.
It speaks to the fact that each and every one of us has a contribution to make. It is not a stretch to say that General Obasanjo is a great man. And the story of his life would seem to belie Tolstoy's views until you realize that Obasanjo is a walking contradiction, the most ordinary and the most extraordinary of men. He was born with great talents and abilities. He has leveraged these to achieve great things and greatness, and has also had greatness thrust upon him by circumstances, by man and God.
Among dignitaries present at the book presentation were a former Minister of Aviation, Femi Fani-Kayode, who represented the presidential candidate of the APC, and a former Minister of Aviation, Osita Chidoka, who represented the presidential candidate of the PDP.
And I'm suitably delighted to say that Musikilu Mojeed, editor-in-chief of the Premium Times newspaper and author of Letterman, Inside the Secret Letters of President Olusegun Obasanjo, joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Clearly you did a good job. I mean, you attracted a huge crop of people, the good and the great, as they say, to your book launch.
Thank you. But have you read the book?
Well, I've skimmed through it,
okay.
You know, but you're going to leave that copy for me, aren't you? A signed copy, so that many years from now, when it becomes a gold mine, I can cash it in.
We will negotiate that.
I like that. Now, it seems on the face of it like a bit of an unusual subject to write about. A book based on letters written by former President Olusegun Obasanjo. What inspired you to take up this project?
Well, you say you skimmed through, so then I'll answer the question, because if you had read it, I tried to explain the motivation and how...
Well, we need you. A lot of people have not skimmed through it or read the book.
So that's why
and it is to those people that you're talking to, not necessarily to me.
Right. So now, I try to explain in the preface to the book how I came about writing this book and on this subject matter. Now you will remember the December 2013 letter by President Obasanjo to Jonathan. So I was
the open letter.
Yes. Where was it an open letter? It wasn't open. It was not open letter. It was written, but it was so I was lucky that I was the guy to which the letter was leaked.
Right.
So the letter was leaked to me.
So you then published it.
I published it.
Right.
And after I published, of course, it should have ended. You know, it was a very devastating letter to Jonathan. Immediately, it sparked a chain of reaction across the country when that letter was written. And Jonathan's re-election chances, was badly affected. Eventually, he wasn't re-elected. And people say, analysts believe that letter played a major role in what became...
In dislodging an incumbent government for the first time in the history of this country.
People believe that letter played a role. Because, of course, before then, Obasanjo was known and believed to be Jonathan's godfather and benefactor. He basically put him there, made him vice president in 2007.
Yeah.
And then he went on to become president after the demise of his boss. So it was really a shocking letter. So after that, of course, all that had happened, and then I went to visit former President Obasanjo shortly afterwards for something entirely different. And we had a storming, we were doing a story at the time in our paper, and I had to go see him to ask for his perspective on those issues. And after that, as an aside, I asked him about the progress of work on his library. Recall that when he left office in 2007, he raised money to build a library.
The presidential library.
The presidential library. Yeah. And that went on for several years. The library was not open. So I asked him what progress he had made on the library. And his face became animated. We had a bit of, it was tense, the questions that I asked him initially, the real reason I went to see him. But once I asked him about the library, he became really excited and animated. So, and he offered to take me on a tour of the library, which was not open to the public at the time. And he said,
what year was this?
That was 2014.
Right, okay.
That was 2014. So that was just a few weeks or so after I broke the story of the Jonathan letter. So he offered to take me on a tour of the building, the library under construction. So I agreed, and I joined him in his car, and we drove to the library. So he showed me, I could see that work was at a frenetic
pace. And it was in that process that you found the letters?
No, in that process. So we got to a building holding the archival material for the library. And I saw that there were lots of historical documents. Not just letters, historical documents, thousands of volumes of books, artifacts, and so many things. But I was, drawn to the letters because I wanted to, having broken a story about his letter just a few weeks before, naturally
you were curious about the other letters.
Curious, especially because I learned at the time when I got that letter, that December 2013 letter, that he had written 3 other letters to Jonathan, and that Jonathan didn't respond. So I was thinking...
So letters that were not made public, basically.
Were not made public.
Right.
So once I saw those boxes, blue boxes, marked letters to Jimmy Carter, letters to this, letters to that, I was curious. And I pulled one of the boxes while he was speaking with some of his staff in the library, and I pulled it out. I wanted to flip through some of the letters. Then I think he walked out. Since I came with him...
Yeah, you had to leave.
I had to leave.
Right. So how did you get back? I'm trying to abridge the discussion so that we move on fairly quickly. Okay. How did you then get to...
No. Of course, once I saw that my appetite was sufficiently whetted and I wanted to return to the library.
But of course, the only place where the letters were was inside the library.
Well, they were inside the library.
Right.
So I wanted to return, but at the time, they kept saying the library was not open to the public. So I waited for some time, but it was one of my most do things that I must return to the library. But I wasn't able to return because of several other engagements until 2016, when it was still not open, but I called up the deputy coordinator of the library, and I said, look, I want to do some research in the library. I did not say I wanted to look at letters. I said I want to do some research, look at some books and some documents and all of that. And they said I could do some limited research in the library, that I could. So I visited, and I spent 3 days in Abeokuta, and I read through several letters.
Right.
So initially, because I must make this clear, I thought all that I wanted to do is to get more letters to do exclusive story, big stories for a newspaper. But after I spent those 3 days in the Ogun State capital, I became convinced that these letters are historical and significant enough to be made into a book.
And he must have written lots and lots of letters. I mean,
of course, there are so many letters.
That's what I mean. I mean, in the course of his career, how did you decide which ones to focus on?
Well, because you must just stop somewhere. You know, I just decided to, you know, to plan the book this way, to say, look, what are the most important letters? I decided to focus especially on letters that were not yet in public domain. You know, most of the letters you find here had never been seen before.
Is that why you call the book Inside the Secret Letters?
Yes, because some of these letters have never been seen. They somehow, well, of course, you could say they are not secret because it was written by one man, received by another person, and maybe other people read it, but it had never been in the public domain before.
So is there a theme that runs through all of that? Because obviously it's a sort of chronicle of his political life, isn't it? I mean, his efforts at bringing, you know, Southeast Nigeria back into the fold in 1970 after the war, his time as military head of state, I mean, the role he played in Africa's liberation struggles, those kinds of things.
Well, the way I structured, with the help of some friends and my boss, Dr. Olonyomi, the way I structured the book is to look at the most significant phases of his life during the Civil War.
So you kind of grouped it.
So I kind of group it. And some of the most important matters during the period, like when it was GOC of the 3rd Marine Commando.
Because the Biafrans surrendered to him, didn't they?
So that was a significant historical period for our country. And then I moved on to when he was head of state, between 1976 and 1979. And then there were letters, you know, his activism after he left office in 1979. He preoccupied himself with a lot of activism, especially the African liberation struggle that he started when he was in office. The fight against apartheid, which he started when he was in office. And how he related with his successors in office. Those were also very important.
Yeah, very relevant.
And then when he was in prison, those were, again, very important in his life. And what happened, the letters he wrote during the period, the letter he received, and then when he came back as president, and then after he left to become an ordinary citizen again. So I look at that from that perspective.
Yes, I don't want to, I mean, it sounds fascinating just listening to you talk about it. I don't want to spoil, you know, put a spoiler out, because I think people should go and get the book and then see what the letters actually say. But there is a theme of political activism that runs through it all. And I wonder if you can give us some insight. Is there, what is it about the letters that you know, and the insight that the book brings that might be said to have application in the Nigeria of the moment? Because Nigeria is obviously preparing for the next presidential election in 2 months' time. I mean, what can we learn from the book in that regard? I guess to some extent it's about leadership, isn't it?
It's about leadership.
Yeah.
You could see consistently, unlike what we think of him or what we know of him, you could see that Obasanjo was a man in charge, strongly in charge at all times. He knows his onions, a firm leader, and you could say that he gave some of the things that he himself would not accept, because you could see the kind of letters he wrote, even to his own superiors. I wonder if Obasanjo himself can take that from subordinates, but he did that, and he got away with them. So he was strongly in charge. One other thing that struck me, I don't know whether this is correct, but the way I feel is that Obasanjo appeared to have some moral standing, high moral standing.
Why were you shocked?
Because, as you know, the Nigerian army, for instance, is a hierarchical force.
Yes.
Where, junior officers just cannot
You obey orders.
You obey orders. You can't just say anything. Obasanjo will talk candidly, we speak candidly, write candidly, not just to the army chief, but even to the commander-in-chief, in very strong language. And I'm sure that even himself should be wondering now why he was not even fired. So, but you talk about leadership, and I'm saying one lesson is that we need leaders who know their onions, who are in charge at all times, who know what should be done. And we need leaders that are patriotic. I'm not sure that I know any other person who is as patriotic as Obasanjo, who loves this country. And I'm talking based on the letters that I've reviewed. You could see right from when he was a junior officer, well, I will not say junior, when he was a lieutenant colonel, a colonel, through all the trajectory of his service to the country, you could see one thing that is consistent, his love of country and his patriotism.
But it really is. I mean, listening to you, as I said, I mean, I'm just drawn more and more into this, because you look at a man like Obasanjo, for example. This is a guy who fought in the war and risked his life, and then subsequently, became head of state, and after that, became an activist, went to prison where he could have died. So another time when he risked his life. I mean, that really shows a man who's gone through the flames, doesn't it, for this country?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. But one thing, so he's ready to do anything. And whatever he believes in, he goes all out for it. Whatever he believes in. Now, let me give you an example. When he was appointed, after he was appointed the general officer commanding of the 3rd Marine Commando, there was an operational order about how the war should be fought. That order was designed by Army headquarters, but Obasanjo said he was not going to follow the rule. That the order...
There was a maverick, basically. He was a maverick.
Yes, of course. So he was saying that the operational order was designed without considering the reality on the ground.
Right.
And that he was going to design his own plan, the operational plan. He was going to design his own operational plan. And that, so he was warned repeatedly against doing that. At a point, he was summoned to Army headquarters. He refused to attend. Can you imagine?
That's pretty bold.
That's really bold. So he said he was going to implement his own operational order. You could say that is insubordination.
Absolutely.
And you could imagine if Obasanjo himself would have said that, as head of...
He probably wouldn't take that from anyone else.
From anyone, but that was exactly what he did. So he didn't show up in Lagos. And he went ahead, he took the risk, implemented his own operational order. And of course, the war ended. What if the war, what if things had turned the other way? That was a huge risk by him. So you could see that he could risk anything.
Yes.
And
because it would have been on his head, but they would have said, I mean, you
cost us the war.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating, really, that In spite of all these things, and the fact that these letters are infused with his character and his personality, and you can glean by reading those letters what kind of a man he is. You would have thought that he would be keen to see these letters published, but you never got official permission to have open access to those letters, did you?
You know, I've had a bit of relationship with Obasanjo, so I know him a bit. And I can't imagine Obasanjo granting permission to write his own story.
But you still asked for it.
No, I didn't ask for it because I'm sure Obasanjo would not grant permission.
Right.
Obasanjo preferred to write his own story himself.
Right.
When he came
didn't
back,
trust anyone else to tell the story
Obasanjo
properly.
is not, I do not, maybe he will, but my own impression is Obasanjo may not trust anyone.
But you did try to get access to the letters, though, didn't you?
No, I tried to, I got access to the letter as a journalist.
Right, but you
in some way.
Right, but they didn't want you to take possession of anything.
They didn't want me to take possession. Once they, they realized I was more interested in the letters.
Right.
They didn't want that. Because if I had asked Obasanjo, it's possible that Obasanjo would have written a book.
Right, in other words, you would have given him the idea.
Or he would have said my letters, and so many people.
Yeah. So in a sense, this is a book that you wrote almost in defiance of that it's an unauthorized book, basically.
No, it's completely unauthorized. Obasanjo said that as much, and it was a risk, but two reasons. I said, look, this is a public library. Anyway, it's now open to the public, so people could take whatever is there, as research material. Secondly, because after the book was released, there were some aides of Obasanjo who called me and said, look, you released classified material.
Right.
And I said to them, look, 50 years after the war, you cannot be talking of materials being classified.
Information Act.
Yeah, so I look at that. No one you can't accuse me of publishing classified material at this time. And also, this is a public library. But let me make it also clear that some of these letters, I collected them from people he wrote to.
Right,
who wrote to him. It's not all the letters here that Obasanjo himself has.
Right.
Some I collected from various other sources.
Right.
Yeah.
And that obviously would give you, because those people, I mean, it's letters to them, so they have possession of
for
it.
instance, I don't know if you saw the letter to Nuhu Ribadu, where he described Nuhu Ribadu as his son. And what was it about? It was after he left office. So he was writing to those who he believed served his government well. He wrote to each of them, thanking them for their service to his government.
But you think that given the sort of editorial freedom that you obviously had in writing this without President Obasanjo breathing down your neck, that gives it the tinge that it has? Because as you said, if he had authorized it, he might have been standing over your shoulder, basically.
No, okay, let's even imagine if Obasanjo had given me permission for this story, for this book, the possibility is that Obasanjo would say, because Obasanjo is very passionate about his presidential library. It's possible he will say, okay, partner with the library.
Right.
And then they will have to see the
they'll
manuscript.
edit your stuff. And
then they will have to see the manuscript before it is published, and I will not be free. I've never been someone. And that's why I've selected all the media organizations that I've worked for. I do not like to be gagged.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to have editorial freedom in whatever I do, so that my conscience, whatever I produce, I can stand by it before man and before God.
So in a sense, beyond Obasanjo himself, just by looking at the book, you get a sense of the historical trajectory of this country, don't you? The political ups and downs, just by looking at some of those letters and the chronology of it.
But definitely, those letters exposed how unserious. So if Biafra had perhaps worked harder, Biafra could have perhaps won the war. It showed that even at the time, the government was unserious. It suggested, the letter suggested, because Obasanjo was basically telling the government at the time that we have a general lack of understanding about the war, and we seem not to know how to win the war. We keep saying we have not borrowed to fight the war. What do you mean? If you lose the war and you save the economy, what have you done for this country? So it gives us insight into even the kind of organization, the weaknesses, even within the Nigerian setup.
Yes.
Maybe simply because Biafra had not enough arms or whatever. If they had pressed harder with lack of seriousness by the government and by the military,
the story might have been different.
The story might have been different.
So it sounds like an utterly fascinating book. Where can people get a copy if they want one?
For now, they can get from our offices.
That's the Premium Times
the Premium
offices.
Times offices in Abuja and Lagos.
Can they order it online?
They can order it through our website as well.
Okay.
So we are in the process of forging some partnerships with bookshops across the country.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
An absolutely brilliant book, and a book that I think is a great historical document for everyone in this country, and gives great insight into President Obasanjo himself. And
not just President Obasanjo, to a lot of other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes it a must-read. So Musikilu Mojeed is editor-in-chief of the Premium Times and author of Letterman, Inside the Secret Letters of Former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.